The hall was plunged into a thick, heavy silence, as if the air had turned to lead. The flower wreaths exhaled a sickening perfume, too sweet for such a moment. I felt suffocated, not by grief, but by the stares. They weren't looks of compassion. They were looks of judgment. Some turned away quickly, as if my pain were inconvenient. Others examined me from head to toe, calculating every detail of my clothes, my hair, my skin. My daughter-in-law, in particular, couldn't contain herself from whispering to the neighbor. She even dressed up too much for a widow. Both laughed quietly, believing I wouldn't hear. But I heard. I always heard, my whole life, these comments masked as normalcy. While the pastor spoke of eternal rest, my body seemed trapped to a frozen chair. The coffin, sealed and distant, was like a wall between me and the truth. They didn't let anyone see the body. They said it was better that way, that death had been too cruel to be shown. I accepted in silence, because I learned early that silence is also a weapon. But inside me, something didn't fit. Voices blurred around me, aunts murmuring about inheritance, nephews checking their phones, neighbors faking tears. I breathed deeply, trying to stay upright, dignified, when a cold hand brushed mine. A discreet, quick squeeze. I looked, but only saw backs walking away. Between my fingers, I felt the touch of a folded paper. My heart stopped. I brought my hand to my lap, hiding the note inside the fold of my black dress. I waited. I listened to the final prayers, the voices asking for rest to the soul. When everyone bowed their heads, I took the opportunity to open, carefully, that small piece of paper that burned like fire in my palm. The handwriting jumped before my eyes, known, intimate, impossible to mistake. I am alive. Trust no one. The blood drained from my face. The letters danced before my eyes, but there was no doubt. It was his. From the man, everyone was there mourning, burying, exulting in empty speeches. The man who would theoretically share with me the final rest. I felt dizzy, as if the ground had disappeared. My fingers trembled, but I managed to hide the note again. No one could notice. If someone approached at that moment, they might have heard the violent beating of my heart, like drums inside my chest. The pastor's voice faded into the background. The remaining sound was the muffled murmur, the corner giggles, the piercing looks. Everything seemed to echo in slow motion. But inside me, there was only one question. If he was alive, who, after all, was I burying? And worse still, who in that room knew the truth besides me? I returned home with heavy feet, as if each step were a silent confession. People were still saying goodbye at the gate, offering false condolences, cold embraces, kisses that didn't touch the skin. I pretended to thank them, but inside I only thought about the paper folded and hidden between the seams of my dress. Already in the bedroom, I closed the door and leaned my back against the wood, breathing deeply. My hands trembled when I took the note from its hiding place and read it again, in the same handwriting that so many times left banal notes on the kitchen table. I am alive. Trust no one. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the memories come. During 35 years of marriage, I endured small humiliations disguised as jokes. His sisters, always reminding me that I wasn't on the same level as the family. The jokes about my skin, about my hair. Fix that, it looks sloppy, and the suspicious looks when I entered stores beside him. I kept quiet, pretended not to hear, because I learned early that facing these barbs in public would only make me an even bigger target. The truth is that, even beside my husband, I was never seen as equal. At the funeral, everything repeated itself. My daughter-in-law, the one who never called me by name, referred to me only as her. My brothers-in-law whispered, as if I were just a shadow. But now there was something more, the complicit silence when the coffin was closed without explanation. The discomfort in my son's eyes when I asked why they didn't let us see the body. The hurry with which they ended the ceremony, as if they feared too many questions. There, alone in the room, I understood that the note wasn't delirium from grief. It was a warning. He was alive, somewhere. And if he said to trust no one, it was because even the closest ones were involved. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Could my own children know? I decided to stay calm. No one could suspect the storm inside me. In the mirror, I straightened my black dress and practiced the face of a resigned widow. It was the mask I would wear from then on. But behind it, every gesture of mine would be calculated. If you were in my place, would you let this mystery pass? Or would you cling to the truth until the end? It was this question that made me promise myself that I wouldn't rest until I discovered what was happening. And that's why I invite you to accompany me on this journey. Subscribe, because each revelation from here on could change everything we believe about loyalty, family, and even death itself. With the note hidden in my chest, I closed my eyes for a moment and heard those words whisper inside me again. I am alive. And for the first time, I didn't know who was on my side anymore, not even inside my own house. The house dawned cold the next day, not just from the wind that entered through the cracks, but from the emptiness that echoed in every room. The cups in the kitchen still held marks from the coffee I prepared for him days ago, as if everything had stopped in time. I walked slowly, trying to absorb every detail, every memory, when a phrase insisted on corroding me from within. If he's alive, who did they put in that coffin? The voices of relatives still echoed in my mind. At the wake, my daughter-in-law had thrown another barb, this time loud enough for everyone to hear. Of course she's going to cling to the inheritance. Black widows are always dangerous. Some laughed, others disguised it, but none reprimanded her. I remained motionless, sustaining my silence like someone holding an invisible sword. That wasn't just cruelty, it was the portrait of a lifetime being treated as an intruder, even within my own family. But now there was something bigger than the pain of microaggressions, the enigma of the sealed coffin. The funeral home insisted that the body couldn't be shown because of the state in which it was found. My son, visibly nervous, cut the conversation every time I tried to question. And that nervousness wasn't from grief, it was from someone who fears being unmasked. I spent the day with the note hidden under the pillow. I didn't have the courage to burn it, nor to leave it in sight. The letter stared at me every time I reread it. I am alive. Trust no one. Fear grew along with a new, almost dangerous sensation, a flame of determination. If he was alive, he was hidden. And if he was hidden, it was because he had enemies closer than I could imagine. In the living room, old photos scattered on the sideboard watched me. He smiled in each one, surrounded by the family that always looked at me with disdain. Why did that same family seem so eager to end everything? Why such hurry to appropriate the goods, the keys, the house? With each detail I connected, the plot became denser. That night, I decided I wouldn't ask anyone for answers. I learned that when the world expects your tears, the best path is to offer silence and attentive eyes. I would start investigating alone. Every look, every word, every document. And I knew I couldn't afford to fail, because something inside me said my own life was at risk. While I turned off the lights and locked the door, I promised myself, I'm going to discover the truth, whatever it costs. What I didn't know yet was that the first sign that I was on the right path would emerge from where I least expected, and would make me question if I really knew the man I slept with for more than 3 decades. Dawn found me sitting at the kitchen table, with only the dim light of the lamp illuminating the papers spread before me. I opened the drawers of his office like someone invading forbidden territory. Among water bills, receipts, and newspaper clippings, something stood out. A yellowed rental receipt for a warehouse. The date chilled me inside, just 1 week before the supposed accident that would have taken him. I held the paper tightly, feeling the rough texture under my fingers. That didn't make sense. Why rent such a large space so far from home? And why had no one ever mentioned anything? My heart raced as I imagined what could be hidden there. I remember the times he went out at night, saying they were work meetings. I believed, or pretended to believe, because I didn't have the strength for more discussions. Now, each absence became a clue, each silence a threat. I kept the receipt inside a thick-covered book. I learned early to hide secrets in the most banal places. I walked to the window. The street seemed deserted, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. A dark car was parked on the other side, headlights off. I remained motionless for long minutes, trying to distinguish shadows from certainties. The note still burned in my memory. I am alive. Trust no one. Maybe the warehouse was the key. Maybe there I would find proof, or even him. Fear mixed with curiosity, creating a silent courage. The next morning, with calculated steps, I invented an excuse to go out. I said I needed to resolve something at the bank. I took a different bus than usual and got off a few blocks before, to throw off any attentive gaze. The path to the warehouse seemed endless, each corner a stage of paranoia. When I finally arrived, I found the rusty gate, new padlock shining under the light. My hands were sweating, but the decision was already made. I couldn't back down. I approached, looking around, and at that moment I felt a shiver. Footsteps echoed behind me, heavy, measured, as if someone had followed me the whole time. The certainty that I wasn't alone made my heart almost explode. My instinct spoke louder. I didn't look back immediately. Feigning naturalness, I adjusted my purse on my shoulder and walked to the side of the warehouse. The windows were high and dusty, but one of them was poorly closed. Before climbing, I waited. The footsteps ceased, as if whoever was following me had stopped a few meters away. The silence, paradoxically, was even more threatening than the sound. With effort, I managed to lean on a pile of bricks and force the window. The creaking echoed in the stuffy air, and for a second I feared it would be enough to denounce my presence. I slipped inside, landing on the dust-covered floor. The smell of mold and old oil filled my nostrils, but was soon replaced by something more disturbing: the odor of paper stored too long, mixed with rust and dust. The light that entered was little, but enough to reveal stacked boxes. Approaching, I saw labels with names I recognized: local businessmen, 2 councilmen, even a distant nephew from the family. In an open folder, there were copies of bank statements, compromising photographs, bribery receipts. My heart raced. My husband wasn't just a respected man in the city, he was involved in something that could bring down entire reputations. And in the back, in a smaller box, I found old recording tapes. Each one had a date and a name written in his handwriting. Trembling, I held one of them against my chest. It was too much proof to fit in my hands, and at the same time, a dangerous burden. Suddenly, the dry sound of a door slamming made me freeze. It wasn't imagination. Someone had entered the warehouse. The air became unbreathable. I heard slow, calculated steps reverberating against the iron walls. I squeezed the tape between my fingers and hid behind the boxes, trying to control my breathing. A male voice, low, whispered something I couldn't understand. The creaking of the gate was followed by another metallic click. Someone was locking the exit. My whole body froze. I wasn't just snooping around a secret, now I was trapped inside it. The cold from the floor penetrated my dress while I crouched behind the boxes. I held the tape so tightly that my fingers went numb. My short breathing betrayed me. Each sigh seemed to echo on the metal walls of the warehouse. The footsteps approached, slow, as if the intruder knew I was there. The sound of boots crushing glass, shards scattered on the floor, seemed to mark the countdown of my fate. Suddenly, the light of a flashlight cut through the darkness, passing close to the boxes where I was hiding. I held the air in my lungs, asking God that my body wouldn't tremble. The flashlight moved away for a moment, illuminating other piles of documents, and I heard the voice again, deep, firm, almost a whisper. She shouldn't have come. My heart jumped. That phrase wasn't said to me, but to someone. Another pair of footsteps responded, lighter, faster. It wasn't just one man. There were 2, and they knew I was there. Desperation almost made me run, but something inside me screamed that I couldn't act on impulse. So I did what I learned all my life. I used silence as armor. I dragged myself slowly, crawling to the darkest corner, where a broken shelf cast shadow. On the way, I accidentally knocked over a crumpled envelope. The sound of paper on the floor echoed like thunder. The flashlight returned, this time focused on the spot where I had been seconds before. I heard a muffled curse. Search properly. She can't leave here with anything. Fear dominated me, but along with it grew another sensation. The certainty that those tapes, those papers, were more dangerous than I imagined. It wasn't just about my husband faking his own death. It was about secrets involving many powerful people, people who would prefer to see me dead than allow the truth to come to light. The gate lock slammed again. One of them had closed the main exit. I was cornered, but touching the wall behind me, my fingers found something unexpected. A small side door, almost hidden under a torn tarp. My heart raced. Maybe it was my only chance to escape alive from that place. With trembling hands, I pushed the tarp and felt around the small iron door. The rust scratched my fingers, but relief came when I realized it gave way with a muffled creak. I forced my body to pass through the narrow gap, holding my breath while the men's footsteps echoed closer and closer. The night outside seemed to swallow me. The cold air cut my skin, but there was no time to feel anything beyond urgency. I ran without looking back, hiding the tape inside my purse. Each dark street I crossed seemed like an ambush, each shadow a predator. The sound of my own heart was louder than the crickets and the wind. I only stopped when I reached an abandoned bus stop. I sat on the wooden bench and pressed the tape against my chest. Sweat ran down my forehead, but inside the fire of determination consumed me. I couldn't just be a confused and scared widow. I needed to act like a survivor. When I got home, the feeling of invasion was immediate. The door was ajar, and I was sure I had locked it when I left. I entered slowly, each step heavier than the previous one. The curtains were moved, the phone on the table, on, but the screen showed recent calls I hadn't made. Someone had been there. I walked to the bedroom and found my underwear drawer rummaged through. They didn't take anything of value. They weren't looking for money, they were looking for signs. They were searching for what I had discovered. I felt a shiver run down my spine. They knew I had been at the warehouse. I sat on the edge of the bed, panting, and decided to listen to the tape before it was too late. I got an old recorder I still kept and pressed play. His voice filled the room, firm, measured, almost like a confession. If someone finds this, it means my plan didn't work out as I imagined. There are powerful people involved, and even blood of my own blood may turn against me. The shock paralyzed me. My husband not only was alive, but also confirmed that part of the family itself was involved. The tape ended with a dry whisper. They won't hesitate. Be careful who sleeps beside you. My whole body froze. I could no longer pretend ignorance. The threat wasn't just outside the walls of my house. It was inside it. That night I barely slept a wink. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the window seemed to announce that someone was lurking. When it finally dawned, I prepared coffee as if it were a ritual of normalcy. The strong smell spread through the kitchen, but my stomach was too churned to accept any sip. I sat at the table with the tape, already replayed dozens of times in my mind. His words echoed like a sentence. Even blood of my own blood may turn against me. Suddenly, I recalled my son's uncomfortable looks at the funeral, the hurry to end everything, the coldness of my daughter-in-law who never hid her contempt. The knot in my throat wasn't from grief, but from distrust. It was at that moment I understood my greatest weapon would be silence. I learned early that when they expect tears, fury, or defense, offering serenity is the most cutting blow. I spent the day as if nothing had happened. I talked normally with my son on the phone, responded to my daughter-in-law with the same sweet voice as always. But inside me, every word of theirs was recorded as evidence. At night, I hid the tape inside a pillow and turned on my husband's old computer. I searched through folders, emails, documents. I found corrupted files, but some still opened. Value spreadsheets, company names, even messages that looked like codes. I copied everything to a flash drive and kept it in the underwire of my bra. If someone caught me by surprise, they wouldn't find anything. Meanwhile, I carefully planned where and when to expose the truth. It couldn't be in a silent courtroom, where agreements muffle reality. It needed to be before attentive eyes, where shame couldn't be erased. My grandson's birthday was approaching, and the whole family would be gathered. It would be the perfect stage. I spent days training the face of a docile grandmother, the woman who lowers her head before veiled offenses. Every racist comment, every malicious joke, I absorbed as fuel. They believed I was fragile, defeated. They didn't suspect that behind my silences I was preparing a counterattack that would change the weight of looks forever. While I rehearsed the words I would say before everyone, one thought pursued me. When the truth comes to light, there will be no going back. And for the first time in many years, I felt pleasure in that certainty. The day of the birthday arrived with clear skies and suffocating heat. My son's house was decorated with colorful balloons, smelled of fresh-baked cake, and children's laughter running through the yard. Behind the party, however, a tension hung that only I seemed to perceive. I greeted each one with the same serene smile they expected from me, keeping inside my purse the silent weapon that would change the course of everything. The flash drive with recordings and documents. Conversations flowed as always. My daughter-in-law shot me a sideways look while commenting loudly that some people know how to take advantage of widowhood. Complicit laughter echoed, but no one corrected her. I swallowed hard, maintaining my usual posture, while inside my hands burned to press the button that would end that farce. I waited. The right moment couldn't be stolen by haste. The party progressed. Candles were blown out. Applause spread. When the brief silence at the end of the song hung in the air, I stood up slowly, my heart beating like a drum in my chest. I walked to the sound system, where my son was playing music to liven up the atmosphere. "Before the next song," I said, with a firm voice that even I found strange, "I want to show you all something." The room plunged into dense silence. Some guests stopped chewing, others looked at each other, curious. I connected the flash drive to the system and pressed the button. Suddenly, his voice, unmistakable, echoed through the hall. Deep, measured, confessing in detail the dirty business, the lies, the accomplices. Each name mentioned fell like a stone amid the silence. The sound of cutlery falling on plates was the only noise that dared to break the recording. Images began to appear on the improvised screen. Digitized documents, bank statements, photographs of secret meetings. The laughter from seconds before disappeared. I saw my daughter-in-law pale, my son's eyes widen. The guests looked at each other, shocked, murmuring among themselves. My whole body trembled, but not from fear. It trembled from the strength that only truth exposed in public can give. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need to defend myself with silence. Those who should explain themselves were them. And still I knew, the most devastating part of the revelation was yet to come, saved in the next recording. The room seemed to shrink with each second. The improvised screen still showed numbers, faces, and signatures, but what was coming now weighed more than any document. I pressed the button, and a new recording echoed through the environment. His voice, firm, but more recent, sounded like a ghost before everyone. "If you're hearing this, it's because I couldn't complete my plan. I need to disappear, but not alone. They'll try to appropriate everything, including my death. My own blood is involved." A murmur crossed the crowd of relatives and neighbors. The sound of chairs dragging against the floor, looks seeking explanation. The voice continued, cutting the air like a knife. "My son and his wife are already in agreement with those who surround me. Greed spares no one. If anyone suspects, they'll try to silence them. Be careful with them." The reaction was immediate. Everyone turned to my son and my daughter-in-law. The eyes that before laughed at racist jokes now pierced them like blades. His face contorted, sometimes in fury, sometimes in shame, unable to decide whether to scream or lower his head. My daughter-in-law tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't support her. The silence that followed was dense, unbearable. I, however, remained upright, firm, like someone who finally finds their own size after years of being diminished. The knot in my throat that so many times silenced me now dissolved with each look that turned not to ridicule me, but to seek answers that only they should give. In the corner of the room, a neighbor pulled out his phone and started recording. Other guests did the same. There was no way to control that. The mask of the perfect family was being ripped off before too many witnesses. My breathing calmed, but my heart still beat strong. I knew that, from that moment on, nothing would be the same. And when the front door suddenly opened and the blue police uniform appeared, I realized that the weight of truth was still far from over. The police officers entered in line, firm steps that echoed on the ceramic floor like hammer blows. The murmuring ceased immediately, and the guests, previously curious, now shrank in their chairs. One of the officers raised his hand asking for silence, but didn't need to. Everyone was already paralyzed by shame and fear. "We receive reports of suspicious movements linked to this family," said the tallest one, his voice projecting authority. "We need to collect documents and hear statements." My son tried to speak first, his voice choked. "This is a mistake. She's making everything up." But before he could continue, one of the neighbors raised his phone, showing he had already transmitted part of the recordings live. Others confirmed they had copies. The officer turned to me. "Do you confirm being responsible for the report?" I felt the entire hall watching me. For years, these same eyes measured me, diminished me, dehumanized me. Now, they sought in me a truth they could no longer deny. I straightened my shoulders, let my voice come out firm. "I confirm, and I deliver all the evidence I have." I extended the flash drive as if it were a silent crown. The policeman received it carefully, calling a colleague to register it officially. My daughter-in-law tried to protest, but each word was swallowed by the weight of the recordings still echoing on phones around. Gradually, the room transformed into a confiscation scene, documents collected, tapes seized, statements noted. Each police movement was another stone in the tomb of their reputation. Those who before laughed at me now averted their eyes, unable to sustain the weight of their own contempt. I just watched, without raising my voice. I discovered I didn't need to shout to be heard. My truth, exposed before so many, had already become unavoidable. When one of the officers approached again and asked if I wanted to formalize accusations, I took a deep breath. It was the moment that would decide not only their fate, but also mine. And while everyone awaited my answer, I realized that the woman underestimated for decades finally had the power to choose the outcome of that story. I looked around and saw faces that before pierced me like blades, now bowed by shame. I breathed deeply, feeling that each second weighed like years. Then I answered the policeman with the firm voice of someone who no longer had anything to lose. Yes, I want to formalize every accusation. And I want it on record that I was silenced for decades. Today, no more. Absolute silence took the hall. The sound of pen scratching paper while officers noted each word of mine. My grandchildren, scared, clung to their mother's legs, trying to understand why the adults suddenly seemed so fragile. My son, previously so secure in his position, now babbled incoherent excuses. My daughter-in-law, pale, tried to blame intrigues and setups, but no one believed. The respect they so much flaunted had crumbled before too many witnesses. One of the neighbors approached me. It was the same one who so many times avoided my gaze at the gate, as if my presence were bothersome. This time, however, he lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Ma'am, you were very brave." I felt my eyes well up, but didn't let the tear fall. It wasn't sadness, it was the liberation of an old weight. All my life, I endured microaggressions, contained laughter, looks of disdain. I carried on my shoulders the stigma of being the different one, the outsider. But there, in that crowded room, my voice wasn't just heard, it became law. The police collected everything and took my family members to give statements. I watched as the police car drove away, taking along decades of contempt. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt space. In the silence that remained, some neighbors and friends stayed, still stunned. I stood up slowly, straightened my dress, and said only, "Kindness was never weakness. Remember that." I left the party with my head held high, firm steps marking each beat of my heart. The afternoon sun illuminated the street as if announcing a new life. And if you heard my story until here, it's because you also believe that no voice should be silenced. Subscribe so we can continue together, transforming pain into strength and silence into justice. Because in the end, truth always finds its way.